So there's a discussion and argument going on. It seems like a lot online and some in churches where God is sort of defined with how America is deporting people because they're illegal immigrants. They're breaking the law. But what's interesting is that argument assumes something first. It assumes that the law itself lines up with God and what God says for us to do. And honestly, when it comes to man's laws, it's not automatically good. Look at how God actually instructed Israel to handle outsiders in Leviticus 19. He says, when a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall do him no wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as a native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. He tells us not to tolerate, but love. Treat as native born. God even gave sojourners in the land the same standing in worship Israel. He says, you and the sojourner shall be alike before God. One law, one rule shall be for you and the sojourner who sojourns with you. It's Numbers 15. They could worship together. They were called to worship together. They could offer sacrifices. They were literally folded into the life of the nation. Why? Because Israel's whole purpose was to be a beacon, a nation so different that the world was drawn to see what was up with Israel's God. Welcoming outsiders was not a side issue. It was literally the point. And Israel failed that mission. But God wasn't done. So instead, he took that mission and gave it to the church. Paul tells Gentile believers exactly who they used to be in Ephesians. Remember that you were at that time strangers to the covenants of the promise. Covenants of the promise is the promise that he made to Israel. He continues, so then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God. Every single one of us Christians has been grafted into his family at some point. We were the outsiders being welcomed in. So here's the question. If a law of man, devoid of love for others, casting others out, does not line up with how God calls us to act, what are we to do? Are we just to close our eyes and say, that's what the law says? Or does God's law come first? Israel was told to welcome the sojourner. The church has inherited that calling. Even Jesus was a stranger. He said in Matthew 25, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And so before we quote a law to justify how we treat someone, it's definitely worth asking who wrote that law and whether God would call it good to begin with.